My name is Noah, and I'm currently fishing on a levee. The key to catching fish is staying calm and keeping a low profile. As I focus on the line I've cast into the water, my thoughts drift back to yesterday's reprimand from my boss. I work in sales at a moving company, a job I started as a part-timer back in high school. A few years later, I was transferred and ended up working under Susan, a truly difficult boss. Susan, now in her 40s, has a piercing scream that's hard to ignore. "You're the only one in our department who hasn't hit this period's targets. You're dragging everyone down," she shouted at me. She never misses an opportunity to bring up my lack of a college degree. I didn't go to college. I started with this company right out of high school. Ironically, Susan attended a vocational school for illustration. She once dreamed of being an illustrator, but after that dream fell apart, she spent nearly 20 years in this industry. At drinking parties, Susan, after a few too many, would often lament loudly, "I should have gone to university instead of that vocational school." It's clear she's frustrated with the choices she's made in life. Susan has a serious complex about her education. She's awkward around new employees with college degrees and tries to belittle people like me who only have a high school education. To be honest, I face daily harassment from Susan, but in this department, her word is practically law due to her long tenure. No one stands up for me. Instead, they side with Susan, leaving me to endure cold stares and isolation. Even while fishing, it's tough to keep a calm and clear mind. "Hey, oh, what's up?" Your line's shaking. My fishing buddy George calls out, snapping me back to the present. "Got something on your mind?" George is an avid fisherman, the type who'll head out to sea during long holidays. His skin is tanned from all the time he spends outdoors, and he always has a warm, friendly smile. "Nah, I'm fine," I say, shaking my head and trying to refocus on fishing. I don't want to let my personal issues ruin George's good time. "Ah, now you're in the zone," George laughs. "It's only when I'm out here fishing that I can really let go of all the unpleasant things." After clearing my head, I feel a tug on my rod. When I reel it in, it turns out to be a pretty big catch. My fishing buddies erupted into cheers. "Nice catch. This must be the king of the area. Your family will be thrilled," George exclaimed, celebrating as if it were his own catch. I felt my face stiffen for a moment, but quickly managed a smile. Even on a day when I've landed a big one, my worries remain. I sighed inwardly, unable to share with George that my wife was having an affair. I have a wife, Helen, and a daughter, Sarah, who just turned 11. Even when things were tough, the thought of my family kept me going. Lately, though, Helen's behavior has become strange. She's unusually distant, and I've seen her dressed up, walking with a man I didn't recognize. I watched in disbelief, struggling to believe Helen could be unfaithful. I've been too afraid to confront her directly, hoping it's just a misunderstanding. As sad as it is, I find myself wanting to ignore it more and more each day. I hoped that bringing home the fish I'd caught might improve our strained relationship, even just a little. With that faint hope, I hurried back home, packing the fish in a cooler. But my wishful thinking quickly crumbled. Helen didn't even look at the fish and instead handed me a piece of paper that immediately wiped the smile off my face. It read, "Divorce." "No way, are you kidding?" I asked, though Helen's expression remained cold and unyielding. "I'm tired of being with a man who's gloomy, boring, and smells like fish. I want to start my life over." I was taken aback by Helen's harsh words. "Start over? Are you saying you're going to be with that man?" I finally confronted Helen about seeing her with another man a few weeks ago and accused her of cheating. Helen seemed momentarily surprised but quickly shifted blame, saying, "It's all your fault. You've always been so incompetent." Her selfish reasoning left me at a loss for words, unable to come up with a solid response. I shouted, "The affair is on you." But Helen retorted, "Do you even realize how much you earn? With that salary, you expect me to handle all the housework and take care of Sarah while working. What's with the attitude?" Sure, I had my shortcomings, but I never intended to burden Helen with everything. It's true she had more responsibilities, and I found myself unable to effectively counter her arguments. In our arguments, I always ended up outmatched, and I couldn't stop Helen from leaving. She took Sarah with her, and all I could do was watch them leave with a heavy heart. The next weekend, I found myself standing absent-mindedly on the breakwater where I usually fish. The evening sky casts an orange glow over the sea. They say staring at the vast ocean can make your troubles seem smaller, but it doesn't bring back what's lost. My worries grew with each passing day. My love for Helen had faded. I couldn't forgive her for driving me to such despair. I thought, go wherever you want with another man. But the real concern was Sarah. I want to be with my daughter, but with the odds of custody heavily favoring the mother, it seemed grim. Even though the divorce was due to Helen's infidelity, it's strange how custody rarely goes to the father. Will I never have a chance to live with Sarah? Again, the more I thought about it, the more I sank into despair. At that moment, my fishing buddy George suddenly called out, "Hey, no, I thought you had already left. What's with that look? You look like you're about to jump into the sea." His words almost made me burst into tears. Normally, I'd just brush it off with a smile, but today, I couldn't hold it in. I poured out all my pent-up emotions to George. I told him about the constant berating from my boss, my wife's infidelity, and the ensuing divorce, and how she had taken our daughter away. I felt completely hopeless. I've been told I'm worthless by both my job and my family. Maybe I should just jump into the sea, I said, tears streaming down my face. I was sobbing so hard I could barely speak. But George just looked at me with a steady gaze and listened intently. He placed his hands on my shoulders and said, "Just being alive and able to fish is enough, isn't it?" His compassionate smile slowly began to calm my heart. "No, if you were gone, I'd lose my fishing mentor. That would be a real problem for me. Can you stick around, thinking of it as a favor for me?" "Mentor? I hardly ever catch big fish. What are you talking about? I fish more than anyone, and the other day, I ended up catching a plastic bottle. Seriously, there's so much plastic trash these days. Maybe I should become an environmental activist." George's joke made me laugh. He has this incredible charisma and a kind nature that draws people in. It's clear why everyone likes him. "Thanks, George. I'll try to hang in there." "Good to hear, Noah. But remember, it's important to have the courage to fight sometimes." "Fight? Just muster up the courage to fight. I'll pick up the pieces for you." "Picking up pieces? Sounds like you're expecting me to die," I said with a wry smile at George's words. But his words made me reflect. I had been avoiding conflict, always just taking whatever came my way. Is this really how it should be? For the first time, George's words made me question what it means to truly fight. The next day at work, Susan was at it again. "Your shirt is wrinkled. Do you even care about your job? If you don't, just leave." Her relentless shouting was just another day of her using me as a stress outlet. This was the same routine I'd endured for days on end, and I'd had enough. Remembering George's words about fighting back, I realized I had a role in this too. If I didn't like it, I needed to speak up. I locked eyes with Susan and said, "So, it's okay if I leave?" Her face changed color, clearly taken aback by my response. "What?" "Well, if that's how you feel," I said, watching her discomfort grow. I slammed the resignation letter I had prepared earlier onto Susan's desk. "Please submit this to the president." The office atmosphere shifted immediately. "I can't believe Noah's finally standing up for himself," someone murmured in surprise. Fine, if you're so adamant, I'll take your resignation letter to the president's office right away," Susan huffed, grabbing the letter and heading towards the president's office. As I watched her go, I felt a pang of sadness. I had loved my job here despite everything. But for now, I planned to head to my usual fishing spot this weekend. I hoped George would keep his promise to help me pick up the pieces. As I was tidying up my desk, the phone rang unexpectedly. It was the president's office. "Please come to the president's office immediately," the voice said. I left my desk as it was and made my way there. When I entered the office, I saw Mr. Thompson, the president, and Susan. To my surprise, Susan apologized right away. "I'm sorry, I went too far. Please reconsider submitting your resignation." Confused by the sudden change, I looked to Mr. Thompson for an explanation. "No, you were managing our major client, Bridgewater Commercial, until recently. Susan took over the account, correct?" "Yes, that's right. I was in charge until last week. I always believed in maintaining strong relationships with our clients, but due to recent low sales, Susan took over." Mr. Thompson continued, "The client has indicated that if you leave, they might reconsider their business with us." "What?" Mr. Bridgewater said that. "Yes, he did. When Susan brought in your resignation, I instructed her to do whatever it took to convince you to stay." "Ah, I see," I said, my anger flaring. I turned to Susan, who seemed unnerved. "I have been suffering from harassment from Susan." Mr. Thompson's face turned serious. "What do you mean, Susan?" Susan stammered. I recounted the constant abuse and mistreatment I had endured. If Susan remains in this position, then I'm leaving for good. Mr. Thompson looked at Susan, his expression stern. Susan, we need to address this issue immediately. No, I apologize for the treatment you've received. We'll make sure this is resolved. Susan, visibly shaken, nodded. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make amends. With the situation finally starting to be addressed, I felt a mix of relief and lingering frustration. At least now, I knew I had stood up for myself, and things might change for the better. I still intended to leave, but Mr. Thompson said gravely, "Understood. Workplace harassment is a serious issue. We will conduct a thorough review of our conduct." A few days later, an internal investigation confirmed the harassment by Susan. She was demoted and transferred, and the company, eager to restore its relationship with Bridgewater Commercial, put me back in charge of the account. That weekend, I went fishing as usual with George by my side. I shared the news about Susan's transfer with him. "Wow, you did it after all. You fought well," George said, his eyes lighting up. "It's all thanks to your advice, George. I'm truly grateful and relieved to be back handling the Bridgewater Commercial account," I replied. "That's great to hear, Noah. I'm glad to be fishing with you again," George said with a broad smile. "Thank you, George. I'm looking forward to continuing our work together," I said. Hey, drop them, Mr. Bridgewater, when we're off the clock," George chuckled, waving his hand shyly. It turned out that the president of Bridgewater Commercial was none other than George Bridgewater himself. Reflecting on it, my success in securing the major deal was thanks to my passion for fishing, which led to George's invitation during a business meeting to go fishing together. I hadn't realized how crucial his support would be, especially with the recent issue. I was deeply grateful. I expressed my thanks to George repeatedly, bowing my head in appreciation. George, however, looked at me and said, "The fight isn't over yet, right?" "That's right," I replied. I still had a significant battle ahead. The custody fight for my daughter, Sarah. "If you win custody, bring your daughter here again," George said with a warm smile. I nodded firmly in agreement. Months passed, and I faced the custody battle head-on. With George's help, who had referred me to a skilled lawyer through his network, I was able to navigate the court proceedings effectively. Finally, the verdict was announced. I headed to the fishing spot where George was, my daughter Sarah by my side. "I've got good news," I said, beaming with relief and happiness. "Thanks to your help, I won custody of Sarah. We're moving back in together." George looked genuinely pleased. "That's fantastic news, Noah. I'm glad I could help." I thanked him once more, knowing that his support had been pivotal in both my professional and personal life. As we fished together, I felt a renewed sense of hope and stability, ready to embrace this new chapter with Sarah and grateful for the unexpected friendship and support from George. Sarah, like me, struggled to speak up. She hadn't been able to express her feelings to her mother, but with the help of the lawyer, she finally conveyed her wish to stay with me. "I want to be with Daddy," she had said. "The battle is finally over, no," George said, his gaze focused on his fishing line. I whispered, yes, feeling a mix of relief and lingering self-doubt. I had often felt that I was only succeeding thanks to George's support. Sensing my mood, George turned to Sarah and asked, "Do you like your dad?" Sarah, now a sixth grader, blushed and hesitated. She seemed too shy to say, "I like" out loud, but she nodded silently. "That's right," George said with a reassuring smile. "Your dad might not look dependable, but he's the kind of person who always supports others and stands by them quietly." Hearing George's words made me immensely happy. It was comforting to know he saw me in such a positive light. I realized that my efforts weren't in vain and decided to continue approaching challenges with compassion. Just then, George's fishing line suddenly tugged violently. "Oh, looks like you've got a big one," I exclaimed, grabbing the net and preparing to help. "Careful, George. Take it slow." George, clearly focused and excited, managed his fishing rod with determination. As I assisted him, I felt a renewed sense of hope and camaraderie, ready to tackle whatever came next with both Sarah and George by my side.